Hello guys, and welcome back to the History and Politics Vault with me, Ryan Gladman. Today is episode 6 of the Gcse 9-1 Edexcel Superpower Relations and the Cold War topic history course. Today we're going to be looking at the Hungarian Uprising of 1956, but before we do that, I just want to remind you that this book by John Lewis Gaddis, The Cold War, is a very, very interesting book with offering perspectives from both the Soviet Union sides and the US sides. Lots of images in here, which helps illustrate the points that Gaddis makes, and a lot of hidden documents that were not available to people at the time have been made apparent and have been made apparent since, are used by Gaddis to explain the hostilities and different parts that the Cold War had, not just political, but the other implications as well. So yes, very interesting. Only £10 on Amazon. So I recommend reading that if you're interested. But more widely, I hope you're okay in this COVID-19 another day. I know in the UK it's horrible weather at the moment. It's raining constantly, but I hope you are able to keep positive and keep to the rules and just go through another day. So hope you're well. But today we're going to be looking at Hungarian Uprising, and this, as we said before, is the arms race had developed once the two powers or two organisations had been distinguished in Europe. So you had the Warsaw Pact, and then you have NATO, led by the Soviet Union, and then there's NATO, led by the US. Once these two sides had been established, then the arms race began to develop, and both of those leading countries wanted to have the best arms capability they could, just to defend themselves against any other threats that could be posed against them. And this Hungarian uprising came out of opposition to the Soviet Union, because the Hungarian economy was controlled by the Soviet Union through the process of Comecon, which we looked at, which was a response to the Marshall Plan that the US had as well. So the Comecon initiative meant that the Soviet Union began to control many Eastern European countries, including Hungary, and the Matthias Rákosi was from the Hungarian Communist Party, and he led Hungary at the time of 1950 or before 1956. And because he used terror and brutality, a lot of police brutality and censorship and authoritarian measures to control his people, it was estimated that he killed around 2,000 people at a time. The secret police became hated, and many people didn't like that part of Hungarian life. So when Stalin died in 1953, the new leader of the Soviet Union, Malenkov, he actually did not favour Rákosi because of this brutal and dictatorship-like structure he had in Hungary, and the way he was going about it with lots of killings of innocent people, if you like. So he replaced him with someone called Imre Nagy, and it showed that once the Soviet Union had controlled those economies based on the Comecon, they also controlled those countries based on the politics. So it showed the Soviet Union's dominance in Eastern Europe, and it became more apparent as the years would progress. However, in April 1955, Nagy was then removed and replaced by Rákosi again, and this change really ignited the Hungarian uprising because, as we said before, Rákosi was a very unpopular dictator, and his dictatorship-like structure really did not please many people. So in October 1956, there was demonstrations starting to be happening against the Soviet Union in Hungary, and in response, the new Soviet Union leader, Khrushchev, who came in after Malenkov, he responded by sending troops and tanks into Budapest to try and stop these protests, because the reason behind that is if there are protests going on in Hungary, it could encourage other countries to fight back against the Soviet Union's growing influence and dominance over those Eastern European countries. And actually on the 26th of October, after sort of mild success of quashing the protests that were happening, Nagy was reinstated as Prime Minister of Hungary, and he began to hold talks with the Soviet Union. And actually it was agreed that the tanks would be withdrawn from Budapest, which pleased many people. And now that Nagy had been reinstated, many people began to grow their own confidence in the government again. And on the 30th of October, actually, Nagy released some political prisoners. And the most famous of these, I think it was Cardinal Mezenti. He was a leading official at the time in Hungary, and had wanted to be released for a number of years. And this step made by Nagy really, it did ignore Soviet Union control because they didn't want the political prisoners to be released. However, it pleased a lot of people because it showed that Hungary was becoming a bit more autonomous and it had the power to do things without Soviet Union permission. And then the day after that, on the 31st of October, so Halloween, Nagy's proposed reforms were published. So he made a series of reforms, and he wanted these reforms to be acknowledged by the Soviet Union. His most controversial one, actually, was his intention to withdraw Hungary from the newly established Warsaw Pact. And this would have meant that Hungary would become a fully autonomous country from the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union didn't like this, and Khrushchev decided on the 4th of November that Nagy's reform, especially that one about withdrawing Hungary from the Warsaw Pact, was too much. And he reinstated 6,000 tanks and 200,000 Soviet troops back in Hungary. And this just ignited the whole uprising again. Many people protested and demonstrated against the Soviet Union, who were coming into the Hungarian territory. And that later invasion was actually part of a response that other countries were giving to the Soviet Union, because countries like China, with their leader Mao Zedong, was pressuring the Soviet Union to react against uprisings. And they recognised as well that if one country began to gain momentum in an uprising against the Soviet Union, it could encourage the other satellite states to do the same. So because they had this pressure from China and they acknowledged themselves that they needed to do something in response, Khrushchev was eventually able to regain control through the troops and tanks in Hungary. And he instated a new Soviet-backed leader called Gaddis. And because Gaddis was instated, Nagy was taken out of power, and he was actually arrested and shot in 1958. So this is a massive symbol to Hungary that now, despite the uprising that had taken place, Hungary was well and truly under Soviet power. And with this Soviet-backed leader, there was no option really to return to any reforms that Nagy had tried to persuade the Soviet Union to introduce. And the bad thing actually about this was there was very, very little help for Hungary from the Western powers such as USA and Britain. They did condemn the actions of the Soviet Union, but Hungary was too geographically far away to provide military troops, and also if the Western powers did provide military troops, it would have caused a whole physical confrontation with the Soviet Union, and neither side really wanted that warlike situation. So that was one reason, but the other reason actually was Britain, USA and France were quite preoccupied with the Suez crisis. So the Suez Canal, there was a lot of tensions over people going through there with their trade cargo ships and who was actually owning different parts of that canal. So there was a massive Suez crisis, and those three powers in the western side of Europe and America were occupied by that. So that was another reason for why they didn't get involved. And all those reasons and the reasons for the uprising meant that this was the first proper battle, if you like, battle or uprising in the Cold War. And it, even though it started to give our countries more confidence maybe to do that or just prevent themselves from even becoming a communist state, because of the Soviet Union's strong response to the uprising, it showed that many Eastern European states wouldn't be able to relieve themselves of Soviet control. Later in the Cold War in 1990, 1991, a lot more states would rise up against the Soviet Union and actually be successful, and that would lead to the collapse of the Union itself. However, at the moment, this growing power the Soviet Union was achieving meant that no uprising was really going to be successful, despite any Western power help that they might have got actually. So that's it for the key topic 1. section. Next we'll be moving on to 1958 to 70 section. And we start with the Berlin Ultimatum and the Berlin Wall that was put up in Berlin until the Soviet Union, until 1989, so all the way through the Cold War. But yes, that's it today. Thank you for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like, put a comment down below, subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you probably tomorrow for another episode of this Cold War series. Thank you for watching.